should just be there in the fun stuff. And this shows up in a whole lot of ways. Like our headset mounting experience is pretty terrible in some ways now. You put on the headset, you see a blink of this, a flash of that, you acknowledge Guardian, it flashes something else, and then maybe you're back in the app and you finally get to kind of go to where you want. That should just be you put it on and you are where you want to be, and it is doing the right thing, unless it has some really, really strong reason not to be doing that. When it gets to the actual applications, 30 seconds, I think, is, this is one thing where the console vendors like Microsoft and Sony, developers would hate this because there were these TCRs. You had requirements where your game won't get sold if it takes more than X number of seconds to launch the game. And you cover things up by switching between a few different introductory things. But most of the time, and I remember being on the other side of that saying, it's like, this sucks. We're not making this, but it should be okay. But I have a lot more sympathy for the vendors at this point now, where I do kind of wish that we had absolute requirements and said it better take less time than this to get into it. It takes a pretty long time to get into Horizon. They do a couple things where they switch between two different intros and they get a little audio cue. And these are all things you do to mitigate the bad. But, the right thing to do in the optimization is don't mitigate the bad, just don't be bad. You want to have some way where it just doesn't take this long. Not like Disneyland has all of these elaborate things that they do to cover up the fact that you're waiting in line for 45 minutes. You're going through these mini attractions and the rails and they change it. And it would be miserable if it was just like one long, enormous set of rails that you were standing in. But they work around it. But the best thing would be to not have the problem at all. And I always talk about the speed of light for things, like what is the real limit? And the real limit for loading applications is like a second. We can load directly from our flash memory here at something like 600 megabytes per second. It is just really fast. You should be able to load up and have things going really, really quickly. Now, so many things are out of your hands in Unity. But this is something that was on my list of things to talk about if I had time, where we have some things that took ages, like the multi-view extension. And that was a really big deal for performance. And it took a couple years of going through before it really always worked right for everything. And there are things like that are invasive that we need to work with the games, the engine developers for. But there is so much potential for making things go faster, where if we could go ahead and digest the assets down into exactly the GPU format and just memory map them from Flash, we could have things loading so fast. And I believe it would make a big difference. But you have the other side where you have things like Fortnite takes a minute to launch on mobile in some cases, and it's the most popular game in the world. So you can clearly say that given a sufficiently powerful draw, you do not have to necessarily load fast. But my argument is you don't get to be that if it takes you that long to run, and you have to work your way up, carefully marshaling all of your users and avoiding turning anybody off. And there are absolutely VR games that I thought were kind of cool that I just quit because I wouldn't go back and play because I knew it was going to take a really long time to start. And I think that, it is great that like Beat Saber launches fast. It's one of the things that I can always jump into Beat Saber. And I think that, that's an important thing. So it's a virtuous thing to be caring about it. A lot of the things are out of your control, but there's definitely room for doing that. So yeah, that's a good goal to be aiming for.
Asset bundles are amazing.
Yeah,
I got a related speed question. Yeah. On the speed thing, I've been working a bunch with schools, and one thing about Zoom in this pandemic is you click a link and you're in that experience. I guess I had two questions. One was, what are your thoughts on things like the WebXR experience and WebGPU and some of these things with that promise of single click? And then the second thing is about input devices, but maybe,
WebXR was on my list of things to talk about because our browser team is one of my favorite teams in the company, where they started off, with a a really small team, and a lot of people really didn't care about that. But I think they've done a great job where it's one of those things where the browser just gets better. There have been it keeps getting better, and there are things that people really care about, like the multi-view stuff is, the multi-tab stuff is great. Being able to start resizing the things directly is great. And on the WebXR side, for a while, WebXR was one of the hammers used to kill my VR script when it was WebVR, where I had done this VR script thing, which was admittedly a quirky as hell choice of languages with Racket, which is a Lisp-like thing, but it worked really amazingly well to do a lot of these simple things. But people said it's like, well, it really should be JavaScript, that it really should be just WebVR. And we've had good support going for WebVR, but few of the things have really turned out to be the magical experience people want. The most popular things are these video players, and these video players do nothing right from a quality standpoint. It's just drawn onto a linear RGB buffer. So what I've been wanting to have, and the current WebXR stuff that I'm super excited about, is we finally get time warp layers directly available into WebXR, and they're going to be adding some special extensions to make videos play better. So that's really good. But most of the WebXR stuff, it's starting to see some of the things like people were having a bunch of fun with the hands. And that's what you're seeing them just go by on Twitter about people doing hand experiments. That is where we want to get with getting the stuff that people do on the Rift and Vive, where on the PC, people do all sorts of crazy stuff. And we just don't allow that to happen on Quest with the way the store is. WebXR is the safety valve for allowing that to still come out. But the performance and quality has been so marginal, where the highest quality thing that's happened that I've seen in WebVR has been the 3D photos, which is just a really simple little thing. I'm like, that actually works. That's a pretty neat thing. But the people that have tried to do more elaborate things, because you get the people doing this freeform experimentation on PC, and then you say, wow, it runs on Quest, but it runs like garbage. Because you really have to, like I said over and over here, you have to start on Quest, build your design on that, and then extend it up on Quest 2 and Rift. So I'm afraid that, like I'd also told somebody else, we have, I believe, a hard rule on the store where the content that's applications have to still be run well on Quest. But I bet we're going to see a lot of people that start doing things where you do crazy fun WebXR thing and like, okay, it runs on Quest, but really you kind of got to run it on a Quest 2 to have enough performance for this to work out, because it's just not super high performance there. And I do wish that we had better native things, but at least some of the video stuff is going to get fixed soon, which is kind of the number one app for those things. Right? Yeah, TNT.
So in my Quest, I don't just really push the joysticks like all the way or too hard, but yet I still get a bit of controller drift or like joystick drift. You know what I mean?
Okay, you should not be getting that. So it's like, you can usually, when that happens, if you just kind of wiggle the thumb just a little bit lightly in the center, it should find its way back. But that should not be happening. Maybe you've got a bad controller. Maybe it did get dropped or something. There's things that can knock them out of alignment. In real old-timey joysticks, there was usually a little screw you could adjust for the centering on things. But nowadays, in the modern game consoles, if you've got a joystick that's kind of bumped out of alignment there, you just kind of get used to nudging it back. But they're the same basic types of controllers you get in an Xbox or a PlayStation or something. And sometimes they will have mechanical failures. We could conceivably add adjustable dead zones in our settings to work around that, where you could bump it out a little bit so that a funny story about that is where I've seen us have multiple levels of dead zones where, in fact, at one point we had 3 levels of dead zones where everybody knows you have to have a little dead zone on your controller because it drifts this, but the firmware was doing it one time, the VR runtime was doing it another time, and then the shell was doing it, or the Unity apps were doing it a third time. And yes, really, we should only have this done in one place. And maybe it should be a setting. I mean, that's probably a reasonable thing to have, to maybe just a checkbox to say, wider deadband for controllers, because otherwise there's really nothing I can tell you to how to fix it other than just getting good at nudging it the right way. But we probably could make a software fix to address that. not a bad idea.
And so my original question was, for the Oculus Quest 2, is it just the same controllers, or are they integrated to where there's less of a chance of controller drift?
Well, again, none of them should do that. It is a different controller. It's got a little bit. I'm not sure that it's a positive step on the controller where the head of it is a little bit bigger, which for the when you're doing the claw to play Beat Saber, it's a little bit less comfortable for that. And it feels like it's a little bit heftier, more front heavy. So I have more worries about people flinging them out of their hands. But it's similar mechanics on everything. Like the battery door won't be popping off, with the magnets that a lot of people had problems with Quest, where it's got a mechanical latch for it. But there's nothing dramatically different on the controllers. Anybody? Yeah, chicken.
So circling back what you were talking about with WebXR stuff. We've been doing a lot of WebXR development lately. We see it as definitely like a place for like B2B and educational things to continue to grow, just because it's like a 3D environment that can be delivered cross-platform. You don't need a VR, but it makes the really cool thing is it's an experience that if you had VR, you could be in VR right now, and it's easily grokkable, easily distributable experience for educators if they custom make a experience. And so that's what we've been doing. We have a site that we launched called XR Swim, which is like an aggregation site for experiences that we've been seeing, because we've made a lot of like B2B and educational stuff that really doesn't, there's not a marketplace spot for that, because it doesn't, it's not a game, and it's not necessarily even worth money, but it's worth looking at. It's worth playing with. So we even put an experiments tab for like things that just don't really have a place, for whether it's, it's not marketing, it's not education, it's not a game, but it's really awesome. You know what I mean? And, and so I guess my question is, what, as somebody who looks at a lot of the stuff and keeps your head in it, what kind of stuff do you want to see built by the community in these things? Where do you want to see that advanced in the WebXR space that makes it better?
The right direction of doing these more nugget-sized experiments where, you'll find a lot of people that want to go build the metaverse in WebXR, and I think that's, maybe you could manage that on the PC, but being really aggressive on mobile is just not the right thing. You need to just be a constrained experience where you go, and the core magic about interacting with something with your hands, you can totally do that in WebXR if you manage your performance correctly. It's people that try to apply techniques that aren't really appropriate for that, or just overreach, where so much of this is being modest in your goals of what you want to accomplish, but then making it all about the polish of that experience. Nobody's going to care what your triangle count or your texture density or things are like that. It's got to be about what this magical, unique feature is that's happening in the in the WebXR space. And I think it's optimization work where loads of developers just don't have any experience with real performance limits. The PC is pretty amazing in what it allows to happen with without really caring. And on mobile, people actually have to care, and many people have just never been educated in how do you go about caring about performance on things. But just keeping it small, concise, and simple. And I hope that what we can do is that, that we can see some lighthouses there where we see something that somebody shows, this is kind of amazing. Now we want to pull a full-fledged app out of it. And that would be a really wholesome way for things to go, where you have this experimental sandbox with more limitations, but people do just crazy things in it. And then when you find the magical thing, and when we started Rift, nobody imagined Beat Saber. That was the magical thing is not necessarily going to be the thing that that you had in mind when you're just extrapolating from the other games. So this I would not be at all surprised if the crazy next great thing came from a WebXR experiment in some way.
Thank you.
I have a related question on that.
Let's get Justin back here in a second.
So I run a website where I do IT solutions and IT support. And the main focus of my research is EG are EMG. And I was just wondering, what do you think, or what do you see as a future concept of control and interactability as far as EMG is concerned?
EMG, what do you mean with that?
It's electromyography.
I'm not familiar with that, though.
It's the sensors, the sensor that they showed in the video, the sensors that they put on the wrist.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not very involved in that. I've done a reasonable deep dive on some of the IR-based brain scanning things, but the electric nerve sensing, I really don't have any sense of. Never used one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Anybody else? Okay, in the back. Swint.
I'm real excited for generalized keyboard tracking. I'm curious how it kind of works. Does it just track anything that's roughly the right set of colors and shape? And would it extend to split keyboards for developers that like them?
Okay, so we did initially build a prototype that integrated with our constellation tracking system. So it was a keyboard with dedicated LEDs all over, which we could make super precise tracking from. But this was, a lot of people kind of looked at this as like, well, a keyboard is sort of a fiducial all by itself. It's this specialized tracking stuff. We should be able to kind of figure this out. So my understanding of it now, I haven't looked into exactly where we are, but we've got an official keyboard that we guarantee works well. I think it's supposed to work in general on things. I doubt it works right on a split keyboard, but I might be wrong about it. That's the type of thing that I doubt would have risen to the kind of the top of, of the KPIs for doing something like that.
Yeah,
but that's a perfect type of thing. It's like, go use it, then write up a user voice for it. That's, if it doesn't work, putting that in, and then you probably can find other people to say, yeah, I'd like that type of keyboard to be supported as well. Right, I see.
As a developer, can I get access to the camera feed of the Quest 2 or original Quest? And the reason I ask is I'm interested in hand tracking.
No, you can't. So there is a firm answer about that, where Facebook is so under the gun on all privacy things, where it's really serious about a lot of things. There's privacy reviews about all sorts of things, and I do not think that we're going to be providing camera access to apps ever. I mean, maybe at some point we've got some way to opt into that, but a lot of people really care about making that not happen right now. So, sorry.
Would you see it as crazy if I plugged in my own cameras and sort of built my own hardware? Oh, that's what I've been doing, is just sort of streaming stuff over Bluetooth.
Some people have done that, and we are Linux related or Android related things can work from that. And on your own, I'm happy if anything like that works. Expect zero support from Oculus for anything like that. I wish we took more advantage of the crazy Android stuff that we can do. It's kind of amazing how many USB things you can plug in that kind of work on Android. And we certainly don't go out of our way to support those things, and we may go a little out of our way to make them not work, which I wish we were a little more supportive of. Chicken.
So last year, I had the privilege of hearing you speak at the breakout area, but I was actually a little bit farther away, and I couldn't quite hear this really great nugget of information. I got a little bit of it, and I was just wondering if maybe you could circle back around to it, because I found it very, very great advice. Some of what you were talking about was the value that developers can do to, like, things that they can do to bring a lot of value to their experiences. One of the points that you made was like adding some VO to the content, but just like things that developers can do to the content they're working on that really level them up and can be successful, other than the things we obviously see in the successful titles. But how would you know?
Yeah, so
I remember you talked about some stuff to that.
Yeah, so I've specifically talked about how audio is one of the most cost-effective things that you can do inside your games, and I take great satisfaction with the fact that Beat Saber being the #1 application where it leaned in on audio, where even when you're limited on graphics and you just don't have enough pixels to do what you want, you can do flawless audio. I mean, you can go ahead and you've got your 48 kilohertz wonderful audio. You can mix whatever you want in there. You've got enough power to do that. So you should have a lush, rich, powerful audio environment. And then voice on top of that is another thing where, again, we are not AAA in VR. Just we do not have the graphics capability to do the things that people expect based on what they've learned from consoles. But you can absolutely do even professional voice acting and whatever people expect from an audio standpoint, you can do wonderfully in VR. In fact, you can do that better than people's generally home entertainment systems because we've got the spatialization. You know exactly what kind of headphones everybody's going to have on it. So there's a lot of value to be had there. But a lot of what I've preached about in especially like the app review sessions is making sure that you actually follow users, where it is too easy to have your idea and build your product, play with your friends, whatever, and be completely divorced from the way real people are going to experience this. And if you're serious about wanting to make an experience that's, going to make a difference, I think, I tell people you should literally make a list of 100 people that are going to play your games. Not just like, here's the little playtesting crew, but have 100 different unique people that are going to put the headset on and experience what you've got from the beginning and see how frustrated they're going to be and how they're going to miss all the important things that you were sure were going to be the key parts of the games. And, watch them, watch when they're smiling, watch when, they're frustrated, and kind of find through that, because your job for an experience in most cases is to make other people have a wonderful time. I mean, yes, some things are challenges and puzzles and involve frustration in different things, but for the most part, when you're talking about an entertainment experience on an entertainment device, it is your job to take a random person that owns this device, drop the headset on them, and have them have a wonderful, amazing time, see some fabulous, joyful thing happen. And it is all too easy to just be stuck inside your own designs about the way things are going to be and not have it actually represent how real people are going to experience it. So, I mean, I can go on forever about all the little details about getting the graphics right, but it's going to be something about the loop, the compulsion loop about exactly what they do. Why did this make them smile? Why did this make them frown? And, and then hill climb. Follow the good, avoid the bad. That was good, let's do more of that. That was bad, let's pull that out of the design. And try not to be too wed to, everybody has their, their pet ideas and things, and try to be open to just being wrong, just finding out that I thought it was going to be this way and it's just not, and we're going to do something different because that's the right thing to do. So, go over to Ashley.
I have a very, very simple question, but first I need to say to you that VR Facebook has changed my life. I actually met my husband in Oculus Home, so awesome. It is very important to me. But just a fast question, will I ever be able to be in venues on my Rift?
I don't think so. Just the way all the development comes down, it would be things like venues are I take that back. Venues too. The old venues was all tied to VR Shell, and there was no way that was coming to Rift. But the new venues is based on Horizon, and yeah, I guess that probably is. There's stuff that'll have to happen at the for the video streaming services that are different, but I don't know for sure. But I kind of expect that will happen now. So yay! I thought I was just going to say it. That used to come up all the time. I'm like, no, not going to happen. There's no way that code base is coming to Rift. But now that it's on a completely different code base, it's probably a different story.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yeah, TNT.
All right, this is my last question before I'm going to leave. Is there any chance, not just flat yes or no, but is there any chance that the Oculus, just Oculus, the company, is going to make a VR development like Unity, but specifically for Oculus brand VR headsets? Because I hate Unity so much.
Okay, so it comes up every now and then, and having written a lot of game engines, I always, just yell, no, we do not want to do this. Because it's the type of thing you think that Facebook has almost infinite resources. We can do anything if we set our mind to it. But the reality is that even if you did go ahead and hire 100 developers and put them on making a new game engine, it's going to take years before it's even comparable to the things that are done on Unity or Unreal. I mean, if you hate Unity, you should try Unreal, where you've got a different set of capabilities there. If you're going to dig into the guts of it, you've got the full source code there. You can do anything with the Unreal code base. It doesn't have, quite as much in the way of community support and things like that going on, but it is the other major option. And then they do have, there's the CryEngine stuff that runs on here as well. But I really hope that we do not undertake going to make a full-fledged game engine. Although, on the other hand, I very much want us to double down on what we're doing in our shell environment, where this is something that's much more limited. It has sort of game-like things. But I used to put these tripwires out, and I'd say, okay, we really don't want to invent a new particle system. We don't want a physics system. We don't want really good rigid body collision stuff going on here, because this is just about a simple thing that puts panels up and has a beautiful environment around it. That is, there's a scope creep where we've integrated most of what they call the Clay engine, which was what Medium was built in. And all that code's been kind of jammed into VR Shell. So it has a ton more powers now, and it's kind of maybe slowly creeping into being some kind of a game engine. But I think it's a bad goal to have right now, because the people working on Unity Unreal, there's a bunch of really smart people working really hard, and they've had feedback from thousands and thousands of developers. And you do not just go out and say, we're just going to go do a better job than them. They're doing a good job on a lot of things, and I would not want to compete with them right now. People thought